She was awakened by a shock so sudden and severe that if Dorothy had not been lying on the soft bed, she might have been hurt. As it was, the feeling of having crashed made her catch her breath and wonder what had happened. Toto put his cold little nose into her face and whined. Dorothy sat up and noticed that the house was no longer moving. It was also no longer dark. Outside there was sunlight. Dorothy got up from her bed, and with Toto at her heels, she ran towards the door of the house. She opened it and gave a cry of amazement as she looked around her. The cyclone had set the house down in the middle of a country of marvelous beauty. There was greenery everywhere, with big trees that bore colorful fruits. A sea of beautiful flowers could be seen on every side, and birds with bright plumage sang from the trees and bushes. A little way off was a small brook between green river banks. Dorothy, who had lived so long on the dry, gray prairies of Kansas, drank in the sight of all that color. While she looked at the strange and beautiful sights, she noticed a group coming toward her. This group had the weirdest-looking people she had ever seen. They were not as big as her uncle and aunt, but they weren't small either. In fact, they seemed about as tall as Dorothy, who was tall for her age. Still, the people that came closer might be her size, but they were not of the same age. Or at least, as far as looks go, they looked many years older. 3 were men and 1 a woman, and all were weirdly dressed. They wore round hats that rose to a small point above their heads, with little bells at the tops that rang sweetly as they moved. The hats of the men were blue. The little woman's hat was white, and she wore a white gown. Over it were sprinkled little stars that glistened in the sun like diamonds. The men were dressed in blue of the same color as their hats. They also wore well-polished boots. These boots were also blue. The men, Dorothy thought, were about as old as Uncle Henry, for 2 of them had beards. But the little woman was much older. Her face was full of wrinkles. Her hair was almost white, and she walked rather stiffly. When these people drew near the house where Dorothy was standing in the doorway, they paused and whispered between themselves, as if afraid to come closer. But the little woman walked up to Dorothy and made a low bow and said, "You are welcome, sorceress, to the land of the Munchkins. Thank you for killing the wicked witch of the East, and for setting our people free." Dorothy listened to this speech with wonder. What did the little woman mean by calling her a sorceress? And why was she saying Dorothy had killed the wicked witch of the East? Dorothy was an innocent little girl who had been carried by a cyclone many miles from home, and she had never killed anything.